Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Masters of the Order, where we talk to those Star Wars creators that have traveled to that galaxy far, far away, and now we are talking to them about their experience to bring it to you firsthand. I'm excited about this episode because I've read her books over the last few years when the new canon started, and she was the first person I needed to reach out to talk to. Please help me welcome Claudia Gray. Thank you for coming.
Thanks for having me.
Okay, so everybody, if you haven't followed her work as far as the Star Wars, she has written Star Wars Lost Stars, Bloodline, Leia, Master and Apprentice, and of course, most recently, you have dived into the High Republic era with Into the Dark. So you've got a good amount of books under your belt under Star Wars. But before we get there, Claudia, I want to go back from the beginning.
Okay.
I want to know where you grew up, and I want to know, what were you into growing up? Was writing always kind of in your future, or how did you come about getting into the writing world?
Let's see. I grew up in rural Mississippi, and Star Wars came out when I was the summer that I turned 7. So that's what I was into growing up. I mean, I honestly think like people now who have more than 3 television channels and, and more diverse media, I don't think you can understand how huge Star Wars was. I mean, for years, it was everywhere in the public conversation, and I was cool with that. I always loved it and was a huge enthusiast for it. And probably because of that, got into all other sorts of nerdy, geeky, fun things. I always knew that I would like to be a writer.
Okay.
It took me a really long time to get up the confidence to try that professionally. I've been writing, it took me forever to even really start writing fan fiction. And I wrote fan fiction for a good 15 years before I was like, maybe I should try doing something of my own. Maybe I should do this. And then was able to do it pretty soon, and kind of want to go back in time and kick myself for not getting serious about it earlier. But I spent that time noodling around on the internet and being a huge geek, all of which has turned out to be career preparation. So, okay.
Right.
Yeah.
So is there, I know it's maybe hard, but is there a moment in your life, do you remember, that said, you know what, this is what I'm going to do for the rest of my life?
I still don't have that moment. I never know more than a couple years out, that I'm going to be able to do this. I didn't quit my full-time job to write until I knew that I could support myself for 2 years on my writing.
Wow.
And I was like, okay, I've got that. Let's go. And I've never known more than 2 years out. Never. I feel reasonably confident at it at this point.
Yeah.
Just because I have a sense of the market and people that I work with, and I feel like I'm going to be able to do that. But do I actually know? No.
That's interesting.
Sort of the moment that I decided that I was like, okay, you got to start doing something. And it still took me a couple years after this, but sort of the big bell ringer, the first novel-length fan fiction that I wrote, you still didn't have, forums were still evolving very much. So you would put something out and people emailed you if they were going to comment.
Right.
That was it. If somebody had to compose an email and put it out there, it took a little bit more effort. Anyway, and I put the story out chapter by chapter, and on the day that I finished it, I drove, I think it was 3 hours. I was going to visit some friends from college, and, we got together and we hung out, and before bed, I went and I checked my email. And it had been, I think, probably a total 6 or 7 hours since I posted the last thing. And it was something like 500 emails. I was like, this seems to me like a good response. This is useful. And I was like, okay, you managed to write something that was more than 90,000 words long and had a beginning, middle, and an end, and people really responded to it. So maybe you need to think about this. That was the first flickering of thought I ever had. It was like, oh, okay. Oh, and also before that, I just never even understood, like, how would you come up with enough story for a novel?
Mm-hmm.
Like, how? It just seems so unfathomable to me. How do you put that much together? And then I had that first novel length idea, and it was like, oh, okay. Like that's, for lack of a better term, like that's what that amount of story weighs. Like that's the feel of it. That's about how much you need to get things moving forward. Or so it seemed to me.
Wow, that's very interesting. So you mentioned you were young whenever Star Wars came out. What is it about Star Wars that hooked you from the beginning, and what has grown in that love for Star Wars? What is it that keeps bringing you back to it?
I mean, I was so little that it's hard for me to specifically say. I mean, I really think Star Wars probably shaped more of my ideas about fiction and storytelling and adventure and things that I like to see, rather than the reverse. Like, oh, here's a thing that exactly fulfills these qualities. I mean, I do think one of the big reasons that Star Wars has had and continues to have such cultural weight, and has had even in decades where nothing much was happening, in terms of movies and certainly TV, is that unlike so many other franchises, including franchises I truly love, like the Marvel Cinematic Universe, those feel like incredible adventure stories, but Star Wars feels like myth. There's that bigger world that you sense the outlines of. I've said a lot of times, I think the two great world builders of the 20th century were Tolkien and George Lucas. And in Tolkien's case, he was sort of resurrecting and reshaping an old mythology. Like, this wasn't it exactly, but if you knew the old myths, you could see how you could shape this sort of thing, and then George Lucas was like, I'm going to take all of this and put it somewhere it's never been before, which was, a true leap of genius. But I think that's the element, that myth element, that really sets you free to have these bigger sort of daydreams about what this world is and where you can be in it. And let's face it, we all dream about that.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's great to hear too, because you do hear a lot of that from creators that were young when Star Wars came out, because it like you just said, it shapes a lot of who you are and how you perceive storytelling and whatnot. Filmmakers are obviously contributing to George. Like crazy.
Yeah. I remember one time at a con, I was talking about it and I was like, who would I be if Star Wars hadn't come out? And I was like, would I like sports? Would that be a thing that was happening? Like, what would I be? I really don't know.
I think a lot of people, and we're roughly the same age. I'm a little younger than you are, but I feel the same way. I don't know. It has contributed a lot to who I am, not only because I do a podcast about it, but I would have this room behind me even if I didn't do a podcast. So, okay, so something to maybe you can share as far as to listeners. I think everybody somewhat understands the concept of writing a novel. Like you just outlined it a little bit with how much story goes into a novel. But the process of writing a Star Wars novel, is there something that's different than your other novels? Is there something you can share that maybe is a different technique or a different part of the process that's unique to it?
Well, I mean, the biggest part of it is that my fictional thing has to fit into other fictional things. When I write my own work, if I say something blew up, it blew up. That's it. Too bad for them. If somebody died, they died. If I want to change things, I change things. And that's how it is. With Star Wars, you have to fit into the greater whole. And as I've done this, I've gotten better at figuring out like questions to ask early on so that I learn exactly where I am free to work and where I'm not. It was easy enough with Lost Stars because that was set during the events of the original trilogy, which had been canonically established for decades and everything. And I still, at one point, I had Darth Vader's flagship Star Destroyer being somewhere, and they're like, it's not there. And I'm like, this is a fake ship we all made up in our heads. It could be anywhere. And they're like, yeah, but it is somewhere else. It is. And that was the first time I was like, oh, all right. And since then, I've gotten better at sort of knowing right off the bat. Like with Master and Apprentice in the beginning, I was like, okay, would I have something with the huts here? And they're like, we don't want a lot of the huts. And I was like, what about just a little hut? And you're like, yeah, you can have a little hut, so, so there's a little hut around the edges of it.
Yes.
And I didn't have to get all into, well, give me spoilers about everything that's happening with the huts and all media, because I don't need to know that. And as a fan, I don't really want to know that. Like, I don't mind too much being spoiled, but I love being surprised. So, I love having that experience. I didn't know anything about Baby Yoda. Grogu. When The Mandalorian premiered, and I got that first moment of like, oh my god, like everybody else, and it made me so happy. True story. Earlier that year, I'd been trying to pitch to Disney Publishing, and I don't write these, but I just thought it'd be such a great idea. I thought it should be Yoda teaching Baby Yaddle, like little kids' books. And I was like, think how cute a little baby Yoda would be. And they kept going, and I was like, what? Are they fools? They don't see this? And then I was like, oh, that's why that book is never going to happen. It's like Grogu was on the way already. He was coming.
Wow. That's great. That is great. So when in the middle of the, let's say Lost Stars, when you're writing that, how often do you have to, how often do you feel like you're checking back and forth with Lucasfilm on certain things, or are you at that point just able to write away?
I always turn in an outline up front and get a really good sense of like, okay, you're pretty much ready to go here. That doesn't mean canon isn't going to change, or something that I put in that I think is really minor actually isn't. Stuff like that. So it doesn't mean that they're not going to come in and go, ooh, this. But I know that the core of my story is good to go. The stuff that actually really matters, I know that I've got clear, full steam ahead on that before I get going, which helps a lot.
And so take me into writing a little bit of like Leia, because I know that's such a massive character. If not, it's obviously arguably one of the biggest characters of the franchise. As a fan, not just a writer, but as a fan, writing her and writing that novel, was there any change? Because the thing about it is when I read a book, especially Leia, my perception of that character changes a little as I rewatch A New Hope or Empire. You start getting some backstory that we never got growing up, right? Is that, do you feel that way? Do you feel like your perception of some characters change after you get into the stories of them?
I feel more like when I get the chance, which I did with Princess of Alderaan, to explain what I think is there, what I've always seen being there, and then you get to go like, oh, I get to make this canon. Great. You know, like I'd always felt pretty strongly that, Leia's mom in all media, Clone Wars, the old extended universe, she was almost never anywhere.
Right.
It was like, this person was queen of one of the biggest planets, and I think it's really weird that her husband and her daughter would be hugely involved in the rebellion if she weren't. I don't think they were sneaking around on the side. And when I asked, like, what does Alderaan look like? What's its climate? What's going on with that? I was told to think about Switzerland.
Yeah.
And I started thinking about Switzerland, and that makes you think about banking. And I was like, oh, think about the money for the rebellion. I mean, these people are building frigates in large numbers. It would be massive amounts of money that would have to be moving around. I was like, you would need something on the scale of a planetary economy to hide that. So basically, I gave Leia the money, not Leia the money, Brea the money. It's like, okay, Brea is the one who is sort of funneling all this over here and doing that. And, and that's where the juice is coming from. And it gave her a really critical role, but one that left her on the planet where, where she's still ruling, but that's still her first responsibility.
Yeah. No, I love it. And you're right. There's definitely an opportunity in novels to dive into, especially those characters surrounding our main characters, to really bring them into canon. And I think it's been done so well.
The main
those novels.
One, The main one that like writing him really made me go, huh, was 3PO actually in Bloodline. Because I love 3PO. I've loved C-3PO since I was, but I started writing, I was like, whoa, he's kind of annoying. If you don't have Anthony Daniels there to really enliven it, was like, oh, wow. And like the dialogue had to sound right. It was kind of tough to hit. And then I realized the trick was the exclamation point.
Yeah.
Because 3PO thinks everything he says is massively important.
That's true.
Everybody should listen to it right now. And once I put in the exclamation points, it started sounding like 3PO. But I was like, wow, I had not realized what a delicate balancing act it is with this character, and really kind of what Anthony Daniels pulled off with him.
Yes, that's very true. That's great. Do you think as you worked on these Star Wars characters, who has been the most interesting for you to kind of dive into? I know we just talked about Leia a lot, but you've touched on a lot of different characters. Yeah. Is there one particular that you've been most interested in writing?
I mean, definitely Leia. I also really campaigned hard for Qui-Gon for years before they gave me Master and Apprentice, because I'd always loved that character and really felt like you sort of feel like the prequel era Jedi have kind of lost touch with something, and the mysticism of the Force seems almost absent from them.
Yes.
But it's not with Qui-Gon. You know that Qui-Gon is still connected to that. And that was what really drew me to him. So getting to write a book about him was a real delight.
Yeah, and it was strange because at that point, I feel like when your book came out, and I could be wrong, but it was one of the ones that started getting outside of the episodes 1 to 9 era, right?
Yeah,
it was early Qui-Gon, early Obi-Wan. So that had to have been a treat. So I'm curious to know, you have touched a lot of different eras.
Yeah.
Lost Stars, like you said, Leia, you have Master and Apprentice, you have Bloodline is right before episode 7. And then, of course, you're 200 years before all of this now in High Republic. Any particular favorite era you like in the Star Wars universe?
Well, I mean, the easiest one is the original trilogy, just because I've seen it so many times that I know that stuff like the back of my hand. I mean, I know a lot of the stuff from the others as well, but is it, possible I'm going to have to look something up about, exactly where X happened with Attack of the Clones? Yes. I know where everything happened in the original trilogy. Like, we've got that. When I was writing Lost Stars, the only times I had to pull out the movies were for things like, just things I'd never paid attention to, like, what shape are the windows on a Star Destroyer? Or the data pits, what do they look like in there? Because we're always paying attention to the person who's walking above it, not the data pit itself. Right. When you have a character in it, now you need to know. So, I've enjoyed playing in all the eras, and I would like to play in even more eras. I have made it clear that if they ever do some novels about Knights of the Old Republic, if anybody else would write the origin story of Mission in Zalbar, there will be blood. I will not stand for it. Like, I want that book.
Yes. Oh, gosh. I think a lot of fans are screaming for that era for sure.
Oh, yeah. I'm hoping we can have that along with everything else. I'm hoping all the time periods are going to be there and alive and active.
Yes, absolutely. Your life, I know it's changed, like you said, and making those decisions about writing and whatnot. But ever since working on Star Wars, how has that changed your life? Because I know you're doing interviews with fans like us and stuff like that, and making celebration appearances at panels and stuff like that. But so how much more has it changed your life?
Well, I mean, I did stuff like that before as an author. The young adult community, or at least in non-pandemic times, has a lot of conventions and festivals. Right. The North Texas Teen Book Festival, you would not believe. I mean, literally thousands upon thousands of school children who love books are all dropped off, and you talk to them all day and you sign books like your hand's going to fall
constantly.
Off. It's awesome. It's really great. But Star Wars is on another scale altogether. Honestly, to tell you the truth, the biggest benefit to me has been that conventions, again, in non-pandemic times, will invite me to come out there. They'll cover my hotel and they're like, come on, come and do this. And when I'm there, though, I also get to talk about my other novels that I've written, my graphic novel. I get to do these things as well. And a lot of times readers who've only read my Star Wars stuff will be like, oh, hey, I'm going to check this out too. That, and also I got to go to Skywalker Ranch, which I will get over exactly never.
Oh, I know. I've seen some video of that. Yes. You guys there.
It's a really beautiful place. And like, it's designed to spark your imagination in a way that I didn't know you could design a place to do that. It's kind of fascinating.
Yeah. So how long, this should be a quick question. How long is the process? So people kind of understand from your ideas and submitting that outline to actually getting the book on the shelf. Like,
less time than you would think. Less time than it would be in any other area of publishing. I can tell you that. Yeah. Like with Lost Stars, when they sent us over the contract, my then agent and I assumed that the year was a typo. Like they really? Mean this same year. Of course, they meant next. Like we took that for granted. No, they meant that year. And it was not January when I got that email.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
Like, I think I got that email maybe in like an April or something like that. And I had done final edits on Lost Stars I was finishing it up at Christmas.
Wow.
Which for doing a book is and that includes that was my coming up with the outline, submitting the outline, approval on the outline, writing the first draft, and getting notes back. And of course, they had it out for August 1st?
Yeah.
Something like that. That Force Friday was right at the end of a month, and I think it was the end of July.
I think you're right. I think it was the end of July. Yeah, I think you're right.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, and 8 months is, that those 8 months after I turned it in include copy edits, layout, etc. Whereas any other book you would expect at least a year between handing it in the last time and it coming out, and also you would be expected to have at least a year to write it. But the shortest ever with Bloodline was about 40 days. That was brutal. And wow. I'm not doing that again. It was really brutal. Yeah.
Well, such a well done book though. I mean, Bloodline's right up there too with as one of my favorites.
It has the only thing that method has to recommend it is like when you're writing, at least for me, and I know it's true for some other writers, you have to kind of get in the groove on a story when you sit down to write each day. In that case, there was no chance to leave the groove. It's like, sleep, go back. Sleep, go back to it. And it was not an uneventful 40 days. Like, I remember I had a convention during that time, and I went to Ireland to be a bridesmaid in a wedding. So I literally had like this floor-length satin dress in my carry-on above my head, and I'm typing out, Ransom Gastropho was doing this, on the plane frantically.
Unbelievable.
Yeah, it was the whole thing.
Okay, so before we wrap this up, the common question that I definitely want to hit on at the end of all these is there a character you would like to write about? Not part of one you've pitched, but is there another character that's either from the movies or from the comics or from the TV shows that you would like to dive into?
I'd really like the post Rise of Skywalker era. I'd be really interested in that. I'm interested to see how you found a new Jedi Order exactly. I think that's a really interesting thing to dig into. What else? Like I said, Mission in Zalbar, and really almost anything in Knights of the Old Republic. I'm a big fan of that game and that story. I really believe it is one of the great Star Wars stories that's ever been told.
Yeah, totally agree.
Yeah, and who else? Oh, my dream, I think, would be to do something with young Obi-Wan and the whole thing with Satine.
Oh man, yeah,
that would be awesome to get to do. I've asked about it many times, and yet it's on not happening. But
Well, we're getting an Obi-Wan series, so hopefully they start.
Maybe there's flashbacks coming. Maybe that's why they're saying no. I have no idea. All I know is I want to see that Obi-Wan show.
That's true.
But,
that's true.
You know, yeah.
Okay. Well, this has been a real treat. I thank you so much for sitting down with me and sharing your experiences. Hope to have you back whenever you can.
That'd be great.
For those of you that want to follow up, Claudia does have a website, claudiagray.com. And she's not just a Star Wars novelist. She writes a ton of other stories. So please check those out. And hopefully, maybe I'll run into you at the next celebration if we ever can get to one again.
I think those days are coming. I actually finally got my vaccination appointments the other day. I mean, they're more than a month away or 2 months away in the case of the second one. But, we're finally seeing the other side of this thing.
I know. And the next celebration as of right now is August of 2022. So hopefully there's plenty of time in there.
Yeah.
That we all can get back there and celebrate with each other. And again, thank you so much for joining me, Claudia.
Oh, thank you for having me. This was a lot of fun.
Great. Thank you. Thank you everyone for watching. Go check out the rest of the YouTube channel on youtube.com/InsideTheForce. Have a great week, everybody. May the Force be with you.